Welcome to Positive Recovery MD. If you're listening, chances are you want to create happiness around you and thrive in your life. We're glad you're here and you've come to the right place. This podcast will inspire and motivate you to not merely survive your recovery journey, we'll give you the tools to build or strengthen your foundation to thrive and flourish in your life. Each week, we'll come together as a community to have authentic conversations around addiction, recovery, and what matters. Growth and progress, not perfection. All while developing positive habits for you to utilize in your life. To learn more, please visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to receive the daily positive interventions that we'll review, as well as gain access to exclusive Positive Recovery content available only to Positive Recovery MD listeners. All right, let's get started.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another installment of Positive Recovery MD. I'm Jason Powers, one of your co-hosts, with Julie DeNofa.
Hey there, how are you doing today?
And we've got a great guest today. He's actually one of my mentors, and I've got a funny story, and I want to hear about you, Terry. I'm going to ask you to basically tell your story. So instead of just reading a dry bio, I want to tell a story about how we met, and then I'm going to ask you to kind of say a little bit about your background, and specifically what I'm interested in is how you got in the field and how you got to be probably, as far as I know, the only non-psychiatrist to ever have privileges in a psych department, which, you know, historically is closed off as specialties seem to be. I got sober in 2003 and I was on fire to help people, and I wanted to get into the field. And I think I reached out to George at some point. I was very early in recovery. I wasn't quite working yet, and I was really suffering with probably a lot of pause. I mean, it hit me hard. I was doing too many pills, and I'm pretty sure I wasn't as coherent as I'd want to be. But I met Terry at some dinner. I don't know if you remember, but I think George said you'd be there, and you walked up to me and were like, I'm paraphrasing, of course. We're like, "Hey, kid, you're not ready yet," and you kind of walked away. And so again, I totally, in my mind, the story that I have is, I was probably befuddled and my brain was healing. But, over the years, Terry, you've been, one of my mentors. And when I had like this crazy existential crisis that I thought, okay, I'm really not even doing any good. Is this a disease? What the hell's going on? And I remember I went over to your apartment and you laid it out pretty well. And you told a story about in the Old West, treating people with consumption. And I want you to say that because it was really in plain English, and you did me a great service because you took me out of my existential crisis and sort of grounded me, and I got going with this positive recovery again. So welcome. And, you could tell your side of the story, but, shoot, like, where were you born? How many siblings? Did your parents get you that bicycle for the holidays? Go.
That part's not very interesting, I don't think. But it's great to see you, and it's even greater to know that you have picked up the baton here as I have put it down, because I'm 72 years old now, and I've been in the field since 1971, which makes it like 50 years. And it's I put the baton down, kind of, although I'm thinking about picking it up again. But you're running with it now, and I think that's great. Not only have you been working in the field as a doctor, but you've also taken it on yourself to learn more about the psychological aspects of recovery, the social aspects, the community aspects of recovery. And I'm not so sure you're great at the business aspects, but...
yeah, long line of ignorance, I claim.
And I've seen a lot. When I started out in the field, cocaine was not considered an addictive drug. The phrase that was used at the time was habituating. Cocaine was habituating, it wasn't addictive. People in treatment centers advised folks not to use cocaine because it was illegal and they'd get into trouble. But other than that, they didn't make a big deal out of it. After a few years, around the late 70s, the cocaine became more obviously an addictive drug, but tobacco was not. And it wasn't until the mid-'80s that tobacco was considered a drug of addiction. Then we had all these, what they call now designer drugs. And every one that came out, they said, well, that's probably not addictive. So we've had this pattern of recognizing what's an addictive drug. But it's not just us that went through this. Heroin was developed by the Bayer Company back in about 1880, and it was developed as a non-addictive alternative to morphine.
Right. You just put two acetyl groups on morphine and it's not addictive, right?
And then in the 50s, they developed a drug called Demerol, and that was developed as a non-addictive alternative to morphine. One of the results of that was it became the most popular drug of addiction among doctors. So we've had this history, and you can expect that there's going to be another drug come along, and people are going to say, well, it's not addictive. My guess is it's going to be something developed for chronic pain use. This chronic pain is a very serious issue, and people get addicted to Vicodin and drugs like that. In my practice, I had more patients addicted to Vicodin than to heroin. And they're going to come out with a drug and they'll say, this is a non-addictive alternative for people. And orthopedic surgeons are going to start prescribing it. And a few years later, you'll start seeing those folks in your treatment center. So I guess that would be something to be aware of for anybody who's got chronic pain, that as soon as you hear somebody say, this is a painkiller, but it's non-addictive, and it's a substitute for the addictive medication you're taking, be cautious about that. Be cautious.
Right. You don't have a personal history of addiction, correct? You're one of the few that I know of. And if you break your anonymity, that would be news to me. But how did you find it interesting to treat this population who historically are ostracized and marginalized?
I've probably told you the story before. I went to Stanford. The way that my college education worked is you're supposed to study and learn and not take things for granted. And if the professor said something you didn't agree with, then you should challenge him on it, make him prove his point. Then I went to medical school, and medical school was just the opposite. You sat in the classroom and you listened to the professor, you wrote down everything he said, and then you gave it back to him on the final exam. And you never challenged the professor. It was just a month or two after graduation from college and starting medical school, and we had a 1-hour lecture about alcoholism. And the professor said, we have a 1-hour lecture about alcoholism. It's the only thing about alcoholism. There are 9 million alcoholics in the country, and get these terrible diseases, and then they die. We don't do very much about it. Tomorrow we start a 5-lecture series on acromegaly, which is a rare disease you'll never see. And I raised my hand and I said, sir, if alcoholism is common and acromegaly is rare, doesn't it make sense that we would have classes about the thing that's common, because it's the thing we're going to see a lot of? And he said, no, nobody's interested in alcoholism. And I raised my hand again and I said, sir, wouldn't it make sense for us to be interested in the things we're going to see a lot of? And he said, what's your name, son?
You made the list, Terry.
I made the list. And on the way out of the classroom, people kidded me about why I was interested in alcoholism. I took it on myself to prove that there was a reason for that, a reason for my question, that if something is common, we ought to learn about it. And if it's rare, that's okay to learn about it, but it's more important for a doctor to learn about something that's common, and alcoholism was common. I found a doctor on the faculty at Oregon who actually was interested in alcoholism, and I pestered him about working with him.
Is this when you were doing your internal medicine residency?
No, this is when I was a first-year medical student.
At Oregon?
Oregon.
Oh, you went to Stanford undergrad. Okay, I'm with you.
Undergrad, yeah.
But he was pretty bold as a first-year medical student.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, it was a mistake in a lot of ways. I was in the bottom quarter of my class in first year of medical school and barely passed, but I did.
That's shocking. You're one of the smartest people I know.
Yeah, well, I was in the bottom quarter of my class in my first year, and by my fourth year, I was in the top of the class, but that wasn't enough to raise me up out of the bottom quarter. I found this doctor. His name was Kurt Holtzgang, and he actually did do alcoholism work. He was an internist. I pestered him until he took me on as a sort of an ad hoc student, and he would give me articles to read, and I went out to a treatment center with him where he was the medical director, and sat in on groups and activities and followed him around. And I did that. And then the next year, I got a grant from NIAAA, the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, to start my own treatment program. So I started my own treatment program in a halfway house in Portland in 1972. So I started in the field in 1971, and 1972 was my first treatment program.
And you were how old?
How old?
I mean, you were young then, starting that up and doing that.
22, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah, well, I didn't know any better.
Oh, you did know. You knew that people needed help.
Well, I'll tell you, I learned one of the most important lessons that a professional in the field can ever learn back then when I started that program. So we had this program in the halfway house, and we had this one patient who was like the star. He'd been a broken down Skid Row alcoholic, but he got sober and he came to group and he was doing great and he was getting healthy and everything. And I saw him every week in the sessions, and it was just absolutely, I was so proud of him. And then he disappeared from me. Nobody knew where he was. And the rumor was he was back on Skid Row. Drove in my car back and forth, up and down Skid Row, looking for him, trying to find him. I was so upset. I hardly talked to my wife for 3 weeks. I just could not stand the fact. Then he showed up again at the halfway house, and he was in terrible shape, and his health had deteriorated, and he'd been, and I blamed myself for that. And what I learned from that was, if I take credit for somebody else's recovery, I must also accept the blame for their relapse. Since taking the blame for their relapse, number one, makes no sense, and two, is one of the most painful experiences I ever went through, starting right then, I never took the credit for somebody else's recovery. When people would say to me, I so appreciate you, you've helped me, it's all up to you have helped me stay sober, I'd say, you're the one who did all the work. I was pleased to be able to watch and participate, but all the work is yours. All the credit goes to you. That was probably the most important lesson I ever learned in the addiction field, is not to take credit for somebody's recovery. It's not me that did it. I can give you a roadmap. I can show you the way. I can give you some guidance. I can give you encouragement, but I can't do it for you.
Right. And I get that piece because I hear it from patients and they're saying it in a certain context. But there was a guy I used to work with who said to me, first day I worked there, he said, Dr. Rustin saved my life. And I said, really? What, you mean the guy that told me, kid, come back when you have more time? And he said, yeah, because I was sick. I'd seen me relapse 3 or 4 times, and he finally just like said, okay, you're going to die if you drink again. And just, I could tell this guy's caring. So, in contexts like that, when somebody, he probably heard it from 4 other people, but it was that time that he's like, okay, I have to act on this. And we're a conduit in that case. Yes, he had to do the work, but I do believe you are a healer. Julie's a healer. Like everybody that works in this field, like we all plant seeds, right? We don't create the sun. We don't create the soil. It grows when it grows. We're sort of powerless over that. Yeah, I always love that story because you are the man in a lot of respects. Let me ask you this. I want you to tell the story of the consumption piece. I was getting grilled by lawyers. Now, I wasn't getting sued, nor was I an expert witness, but somehow my name was on a case. And These guys were well-funded by a group I'm not going to say, and they were just ruthless, like just tearing me apart as far as like I'm trying to defend that addiction is a disease. And I went over to your house and I'm like, dude, I don't know how to explain it. And you said,
back 100 and 150 years ago, people in the cities were dying from a disease they called consumption. And the reason they called it consumption was that they would waste away. There'd be healthy people, and then they would just lose weight and get pallid and weak, and then they would get a cough, and then they would die. And nobody knew.
I think Doc Holliday from Wyatt Earp, right?
Yes, that's
that character.
He was
right.
Doc Holliday had consumption. That's right. So they said, well, you need to go to a dry climate because you're producing all this sputum, and so a dry climate like in Phoenix, Arizona, will be helpful to you. And so they built these sanatoriums out there in Arizona, and sometimes people got well. They didn't know what the cause of this was. They tried lots of things. They tried puncturing the lungs. They tried, I suppose they would try hydroxychloroquine if they'd had it back then.
Injecting UV light.
Inject light or bleach or something.
Right.
Inhale bleach. All right. So help me out here with that's the story about consumption.
Right. So we didn't know. Now today we know that's tuberculosis. We have a causative agent, and then I'm surprised you don't know it, because in my mind it was something you had told 1,000 times. So we used to think alcoholism was a characterologic flaw. We didn't realize that there was a brain dysfunction and all these other things, and now we know that today. And something to the effect of, and there was absolutely no hubris whatsoever. It was like, we might not know everything right now, but we know when we do these certain things, people get better.
Yeah.
So ultimately, it doesn't matter. You can answer the fundamental question that it's a disease, the way you define disease, and treatments are effective. So
that's true. Now, the one thing is, I don't have that as a canned story, though. That story just came up because of you.
Okay.
That's your story. Okay.
I know. I make up a lot of things in my head.
No, it's not a canned story. The fact is, they didn't know what caused tuberculosis. They didn't know why people died. But if they did find something that worked, then why not do that, even if you don't know? Now, I've had patients all the time who tell me, why is this happening to me? Why? And my general response is, we only have so much time. We can spend this next hour talking about why this is happening to you, or we can spend it talking about what you need to do to get better. Now, if we do the first one, you'll understand why, but you won't be any better. So
That's right.
Is it more important for you to get better or to understand why? And they'll think about that, and they say, well, it's more important that I get better. I said, okay, so let's not worry about why. I don't know why. I don't know why you have an addiction and your brother does not. I don't know why. I don't know why you're doing all the things that sound like the right things and still you relapse. I don't know why. But here's the things that we can do to make things better.
Well said. So you're not a psychiatrist.
Well, I don't play one on TV. I have gotten to where I call myself a psychiatrist just because it takes less time than explaining. I'm not a psychiatrist. I graduated from medical school. I did a residency in internal medicine. And during my medical school years, I started an addictions clinic. Because remember, I started in medical school. So my residency, I started an addictions clinic, and then I started treatment programs, probably started 15 or 20 of them over the years. I took it on myself to learn psychiatry. Then in Houston, I got involved in a therapy method called psychodrama. And I studied psychodrama for 12 years and became certified at the practitioner level and at the trainer level, and trained other people to be psychodrama therapists. And then I joined the faculty of the medical school in the Department of Psychiatry.
How did that come about? Because for those of you that are listening that don't really understand, doctors have specialties and we're very protective of it. So if you can imagine a non-psychiatrist applying to have privileges or be on the staff in the Department of Psychiatry, for the most part, I think no would be the response before they even dug into, who is this person? Because we just don't do that. You need training. You need a residency. Forget it. So how did that come about?
It was 1989. I was the medical director. Well, I guess I have to go back a little bit. I started working at West Oaks Hospital here in Houston in 1980, doing physical examinations on the psychiatric patients. With I had a friend, Lee Woodham, who's a psychiatrist, and he said, I need someone to do the physicals. So I said, okay, I did that. I gradually learned more and more psychiatry just from being around there in that hospital. Then they opened an addictions unit, and they asked me to be the medical director. So that was in 1980-something or other. And I became the medical director of the addictions unit and worked with the psychiatrists. And then in 1989, I was offered a position, a faculty position at the medical school, specifically to do addictions. So they knew.
That's how it fell in the department. Okay, yeah. Gotcha.
So Dr. Robert Gwynn, he was the chair of the department. He said, I'd like you to do this. And I said, well, I'll start a unit at Harris County Psychiatric Hospital, but there's a couple of requirements. First, we're going to go smoke-free.
What year was this?
1989.
That's amazing.
So
that is amazing.
Tobacco's an addictive drug. It's more destructive than many of the other drugs. And we need to have a smoke-free unit. And in addition, we need to treat tobacco addiction along with the other addictions. And he said, well, maybe people will refuse to come in because of that. And I said, tell you what, Dr. Gwynn, if the census drops by 10% after I start this program, then I will give it up and go back to the old way. In fact, it didn't drop at all. Census didn't drop at all. And we had people coming because it was a smoke-free unit. And then we learned how to integrate nicotine dependence along with other dependencies and on that unit. And that was an innovative thing at the time. There were maybe only one or two other places around the country that integrated nicotine dependence along with other drug dependencies. And I was part of the group in ASAM that pushed very hard for this around the country. And today, it's kind of common, isn't it, to treat nicotine.
Was that about the time that you wrote your book? Was that your first book?
Yeah. So that book I started a little bit before that. I was the medical director for a treatment program down in Richmond, Rosenberg, and I was doing fine, and I wanted to write a book. And I went to an ASAM meeting, and they had a display of a book display of all these books, and there were lots of books about addictions, and there was nothing on the table about tobacco. So I said, okay, I'll write something about tobacco. And so I just started, and then that treatment program in Richard Rosenberg went belly up, something maybe some of your viewers are familiar with. I was between jobs for a while. And so I took a job 2 days a week being a doctor for the University of Houston Student Health Service. And that was good. That was fun, seeing students for, ordinary things. And I asked the director if I could start a smoking cessation group for the students. And she said, sure, I can't pay you, but if you want to do that, that's fine. So I put signs up all around the campus, and twice a week, we had a smoking cessation group. And I just started it and started talking about addiction recovery and how it might relate to cigarettes, and got the stories from all the students. And every night I'd go home and sit down at the computer and write for about 2 hours about what came up. And at the end of that time, I had the makings of a book. And then I tried to sell the book to Hazelden, which is a treatment center up in Minnesota that has a publishing arm. And I got a note back from them that said, we do not deal with tobacco addiction. Tobacco is not an addicting drug. We don't deal with it. And I asked around and found out that there were several people on the board of directors who were smokers. So I kind of forgot about it after that. And then in 1990, I got a call from a guy named Tim McIndoe who said, that lady that was here before, Kathy, she left, and I'm the new acquisitions editor, and I found your manuscript in the bottom drawer. Oh. And it's very interesting. And I said, that's not a manuscript, that's a book. And he said, no, that's a manuscript. It needs a lot of work, but I'm willing to work with you on it. And it took about a year, and that's when I came up with the book, Quit and Stay Quit, which is about a recovery approach to quitting smoking. And that became the basis of a whole system that I taught at ASAM meetings, and by going to treatment centers. I've probably given 1,000 talks about how to develop a recovery approach to nicotine dependence.
Yeah, and it's a great book. So for our listeners, again, it's called Quit, Stay Quit. What edition is it on?
Oh, I have no idea. But
so published by Hazelden.
It's published by Hazelden, yeah. And then I wrote another one. And then the next thing that happened was that you wrote a book.
I did. Well, that's not in your story, but I will say that if there were smokers on the board of Hazelden, the interesting thing is, at least today, there's no smokers, or on the board of RJ Nabisco, none of those board members smoke. Which is a tactic I use to get people to quit, because if you're smoking, you're like voting economically for the tobacco industry. And, I say, listen, how much are you spending on cigarettes per year? And it's about 4,000 to 5,000. And now with the, increase in cigarettes, I was like, listen, you're probably helping fuel the jet of these board members, none of whom smoke. So, hey,
Well,
keep
now
feeling their jet.
now, see, what you're doing there is you're trying to be logical. And let me ask you this: when is the last time you had a person with an addiction quit because it was logical?
Oh man, it must have been before time was time, right?
Okay, addiction by its nature is not logical. Getting sober is not logical. It's a spiritual and it's emotional, but it is not logical.
Emotional. I was instilling anger. Damn those guys taking my money. That's what I was trying to do.
Okay, well, that's naive because...
Okay, here it comes.
Because remember now, cigarettes are a good example, but any addiction, you're looking on the drug as a problem, and the patient is looking on the drug as the solution to a problem.
Right.
It's his stress, it's his anxiety, it's his problem with self-worth, it's his anger, it's his fear, whatever it is, it solves a problem for him. And
right, I'm not giving them a solution.
I haven't been through your treatment program, but I'm betting that you help people towards recovery by showing them how it's a solution to their problem.
Right. We don't get them mad at the board members of RJ Nabisco.
Yeah. It's important that we take care of ourselves and take care of others.
Totally agree.
And there's some simple things we can do to take care of others. Wear a mask, limit going to gatherings. If you're not feeling well, stay in. Encourage other people to do that. Simple thing, but it's taking care of your neighbor, taking care of other people. And if we don't do that, it's going to be disastrous. It's already disastrous. So again, the message is take care of yourself and take care of others.
As we look at the positive intervention for today, it really was about doing the right thing. And oftentimes in addiction medicine and in recovery, we work with our clients on kind of the emotions around carrying resentments and learning to let go. So part of what today's PI was about was to journal about resentments that we might be harboring, and that this includes any directed inward or toward yourself, a type that can be uniquely painful and damaging. So we had asked if Dr. Rustin would participate in today's PI and kind of journal about a simple resentment that he's had in a few words or a couple of brief sentences, and if he'd be willing to share that with us today. So I wonder if you might do that, either Dr. Rustin or Dr. Powers.
We had a saying that to start a new 12-step meeting, all you needed was a resentment and a coffee pot. Right. And we think that we'd have resentments for good reason. Everyone thinks that they are holding on to something for a reason. When I moved to the medical school in 1989, I told you about that, I had started a program at West Oaks Hospital, and it was a terrific program, absolutely terrific, in my opinion and in the opinion of others. And we did psychodrama twice a week. A lot of those people are still sober and contributing in the community. It's wonderful. So I was getting ready to leave to go to the medical school, and I sat down with the administrator, and I said, I've arranged for this woman to come in and be the psychodrama leader. She's in private practice, but she'll do the psychodrama. And he said, oh, we're not going to do psychodrama anymore after you leave. I said, well, it's a really important part of the program. He says, no, it isn't. He says, it doesn't matter what you put into a treatment program. You just have to put something. And the only reason we're doing psychodrama is because you do it for free. We'll just put in a video or something in that slot. It doesn't make any difference what you put in. And I said, no, it's crucial what you put in. He said, no, it isn't. Immediately after that, I went to a psychodrama retreat in Taos, New Mexico. And I spent the whole time working on my resentment at this administrator. It was eating me up. And I just gritting my teeth all the time. And I was part of this psychodrama, and the person who was leading it said, what are you getting out of holding on to their resentment? And I said, nothing. I'm not getting anything out of it. Shut up. And he said, yeah, you are. You're getting something out of it, or you wouldn't hold on to it. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, well, you got to be working on that. And I figured out, it took a couple of years, and I finally figured it out. What I was getting at or holding on to that resentment was it proved that I was right. And it was so important for me to be right that I could never even consider that I was wrong. But in fact, I don't have any special rightness. I don't have anything magic about me that makes me right all the time. And I had to then consider that as much as it pained me, maybe the administrator was right. And it doesn't matter what you put into a treatment program. So then I had to do that for a couple of years. And then I went back and saying, yeah, it does matter, but I always have to be willing to say, maybe I am not right. Maybe I'm wrong. And whenever I feel that resentment coming up, I recognize it now. And then I say, there's something in the 10th step that says, and when we were wrong, we promptly admitted it. I have made it a point to live my life by that 10th step. When I was wrong, I promptly admitted it. And that has been the thing that has helped me deal with that issue of resentments more than anything.
That's great. That's
yeah,
great.
it is. And I think, like, from a leadership perspective too, when people are able as leaders to admit that they were wrong or admit that they could have gone it about a different way, that with the team or the group of clients that you're leading, they are very welcoming and respectful of the fact that you can kind of take a look at what you've done or what you could have done differently. So that is pretty cool. Thanks for sharing that with us.
You see, because you can, instead of letting the resentment control you, you can use it to teach you and say, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. I got to do something different.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Powers, do you have anything you want to share?
Well, no, but I will, just to be consistent. Yeah, this one was painful for me, and I kind of, like, even if it takes me 2 years, I'd be really happy to get over this. So I don't, when I was doing this, and I thought, like, okay, who do I resent? Who do I resent? And really, I don't resent anybody. I'm kind of, at least I've learned in my recovery journey about taking responsibility, my side of the street. And so, when you point one finger at someone else, 3 are pointed at you. But this is what keeps coming up for me, is like, I resent myself for having been hurtful or making others feel bad. And this is like, this spans my entire life. Unfortunately, this sort of thing that comes up has like a annoyingly photographic memory. So like when I was a child or, a teenager, and during that time, I kind of understand I was really insecure and didn't have it easy. And I, and sort of a lot of self-loathing was directed outward. And, it's not like I ever went and beat anybody up or anything like that. But, even like during the course of being a parent of 3 kids and not being nice, it'll like hit me, the thought of what I did like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, a week ago. If I do anything that's like mean, I cringe, and then I feel terrible. I have like a shame attack, and I hate it. It's like, thinking about, Terry, what you said, it's not like I like play the tape, because it just comes, and it's like, and it's really annoying because it's a random thought. So I was journaling before I do that, because, when I was journaling, I was like, okay, how can I nurture some loving kindness, forgiveness, and empathy? So I'm going to do the 2 sessions on forgiveness from our workbook and see, there's the whole giving myself space, granting forgiveness, and then experiencing forgiveness. And, it's for a different podcast maybe. But as I'm saying this out loud, I realize being mindful of this, it's like a new thing that I'm mindful of it. Like, I'm going out of my way to try not to make anybody feel bad or less than. It still happens. I'm human. But I think maybe the lesson is, when I am mindful, and the more I can be compassionate and, hold my tongue and just sort of phrase things the right way and not try to make anybody feel less than, I think maybe that stuff will go away. At least that's what I hope.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. Dr. Rustin, you look like you had a thought there.
My experience is that things that you don't like don't go away on their own. You got to put some effort into it.
Like,
right, which I think,
the more I attempt to be loving, kind, to others, and hold my tongue and phrase things, I think if I work on that more, that was the epiphany I had while saying this, but who knows?
So instead of trying to not hurt anybody, what was it that Yoda said? Do or do not. There is no try.
Exactly.
Do or do not, there is no try. Put in something positive, even if you're not sure that it's right.
Okay. So
thank you for pointing that out to me. That's, you have bad breath. Instead of saying,
glad we're not in the same room.
Yeah. So instead of saying, mind your own business, thanks for pointing that out to me. See what you can do to make things positive, and then see if you feel differently about it.
It's good. Yeah. Instead of avoiding the negative, feel positive.
Push something positive.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
What a nice nose you have. That was very perceptive.
So as we go into getting ready for the next PI, which is one that's about connection and social relationships, I just want to read that. And I'm going to ask Dr. Powers to actually say the last name because I'm not going to butcher it, but he says it so beautifully. By far, the greatest predictor of happiness in the literature is intimate relationships. Why are social connections so important to well-being? Because good social relationships serve many vital needs. That's a Sonia.
Lyubomirsky.
That's a quote from Sonia. And it's so, so true. And just kind of having this conversation today with you two guys has been that way for me, just to watch the ease and the connection that the two of you have, and just kind of the fun that you did poking earlier. Human beings are social animals. We need each other and we need others to flourish. People help in hard times and enhance the good times. Positive social ties can improve health, well-being, and longevity. Relationships in recovery are intertwined. The chances of managing addiction without social support are very low. So the PI for next week that we're going to focus on is making time to speak with 3 people that you care about, but with whom you do not often interact. Let them know that you are grateful for what they bring to your life. If you feel awkward bringing this up, you might choose to tell them that you're actually fulfilling a PI for the day or a task for the day. Perhaps the interaction will lead to a visit or a different unforeseen opportunity. So if possible, connect with someone in recovery who is struggling today and let him or her know that you care. Share your experience and your ear. You're living proof that recovery from addiction is possible. And so we take our daily positive interventions out of the Positive Recovery Daily Guide, which Dr. Rustin will be sending you one of these. And hopefully you'll listen in on our podcast. We do one each week with our listeners. And what's kind of cool is we have on the Positive Recovery MD Facebook page people that are kind of posting up their responses to what's going on with the PIs. And I love some of the work that we've seen with the goal setting and people kind of rooting each other on. It's kind of small, but it's gaining some momentum at this point. But it's just exciting to see people take it as an extension of the recovery that perhaps was started in treatment or in one of the outpatient settings. And so our experience has been the longer you stay connected, the more successful you may be. And I'm fortunate to be part of Positive Recovery Centers and to know both of you. So thanks so much for being here today, Dr. Rustin.
My pleasure.
Yes. Thank you so much, Terry. Appreciate it.
Best of everything to your family.
Thank you.
Stay safe, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Positive Recovery MD. Don't forget to visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to get your daily positive intervention sent straight to your inbox. Be sure to subscribe to Positive Recovery MD on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast to receive an automatic download when a new episode drops. And as always, if you or someone you know needs help, visit positiverecovery.com or call 877-4SOBRIETY, which is 877-476-2743. We are here to help.